Thank you, Dr. Denison, and thank you for inviting me today. Actually, I did not begin by studying political science. My basic degree was science in education. But then I got involved with the Catholic Student Society, and somehow I was introduced to, the importance of Christian being socially engaged. So in the end, I thought, the solution may be in development studies. So I did some development studies, but somehow I ended up in political science. Anyway, so I'm going to start this presentation with a proposition. Actually, I wanted to start by asking you, how many of you were in Brazil? But Pastor Daniel already preceded me. So I changed the question and said, how many of you were in Brazil for the first time? Quite a number of you, right? I think that I believe that experience would have some impact on you in terms of your sense of citizenship, because what I see there is, when you sing Negaraku there, do you think it was different from other occasions when you sang Negaraku? Yes, huh? And it was very meaningful, and people, I think, those people who just sang maybe mechanically in schools and so on, there it was very meaningful. That is because, I guess, I want to also ask you, what do you hope to achieve by going to Brazil? Maybe I get some 3 answers. Any of you? What do you hope to achieve? Why do you go there? Say again? For change. We want change, right? We want somebody to undo. Okay, any other reason you go? Correct, yeah, thanks. It's important to make a stand. Whether there is a change or not, it doesn't matter, but I just go because I want to make a stand. I think many people also feel this way. Any third reason? Say again? Make up the number. Yes, we want to speak louder, right? We want to say we can make it, and many of us disapprove of what the situation in the country, and we want somebody at the top to hear our voice. Okay, but you see, among the 3 reasons we give, actually, the one who say we just want to make a stand, they didn't expect any change. Maybe they think there won't be change. Maybe, yeah. And then the other ones say they want change. So maybe they expect the rally to effectuate some change. And the other one, the third one, say we want to make up the number. So maybe the thinking is, if we have big numbers going down, then maybe there will be change, right? So actually the assumption there is different. So the issue is, how can citizens' voice be heard? And I think it is not an easy question to answer. I think the civil societies are also trying to figure out how, the voice of citizens can be heard. And it is not so evident. So with that, actually I want to start with the first proposition that I want to put forward to you, that it is not a natural thing to be a citizen. I will try to explain why. It doesn't work. It's not switched on, is it? Okay. Here, actually this article sort of caught my attention, and I sent to quite a few people. And then, some responded to me and said, that is exactly me, But you will read, and some of you may get angry, but we'll read together some of the passages. He says, the title is Malaysians Helpless Liberal. So probably it speaks to many of us here. He says, the Malaysian liberal can be a curious character. So do you listen to BFM radio? And then you read The Age, the Malaysian Insider, or foreign publication, Al Jazeera, and so on. And then he learns about latest crackdown and latest Malaysian fiasco. So you are very well informed. You know what is going on. And then he decries it later with his friends and acquaintances over supper at a mamak store, or dinner at the restaurant, or drinks at the country club. And then, some of you who are internet savvy, you will just go to Facebook and then, on the Twitter, and you express your anger or your disapproval and so on. And we know that, Najib have got a lot of negative feedback from his own Facebook and Twitter. Now, I think the hard part that the author was saying was that he's so helpless, they are so informed, they are very angry, they want the system to change, but he said they did not do enough. He says he loves his country, still does, with the weary resignation of someone who's been disappointed by the thing he loves and expect to be disappointed again. He is affable, temperate, cautious, and considerate. He's also indisputably, utterly helpless. So he called us a bunch of we are feeling learned helplessness. So actually, when you listen to some of the conversations, I can feel that, because I was in a BEC, the basic ecclesiastic among the church members. Then the one person was telling us, cracking joke about one MDB and so. And then he ended up saying, we can't do anything. We can't do anything. Yeah? So there is this sense of learned helplessness. So the issue is, what can we do? But why is this happening? I think that one of the things is that it's not actually something natural that, for a group of people to think by their action, the system will be changed. Why? I think that this concept of citizenship is very modern. Of course, we have seen that in the Bible and so on. The word had existed. Even in the Roman time, there is this distinction between citizens and others. But the word as it is understood now is very modern. It's mainly in the context of, the modern system of nation states. Now, I just want to give you a feel of one of the scholars on nationalism. He was writing about, we have anti-colonialism. So anti-colonialism means, these white people come and they colonize us. And so we have the right to drive them out and to govern ourselves, right? And then this governor, he was saying, life, he was talking about pre-democracy time. So life is difficult and serious business. The protection from starvation and insecurity is not easily achieved. In the achievement of it, effective government is an important factor. Could one think of a sillier and more frivolous consideration than the questions concerning native vernacular of the governors? So he was referring to that. Hardly, and men have seldom had time or taste for such curious frivolity. The question they have in the past asked is rather whether the new rulers are less corrupt and grasping or more just and mercy. So this was more the more typical mentality, because the people are helpless, and then they are at the mercy of the so-called rulers and emperors and so on, right? So what they want to hope for was, hopefully the new king will be more merciful, right? And actually, similar thing was happening in Malaya. We were told that during the old time, actually the population was sparsely populated and people are quite mobile. And when a sultan was good, and then people will come to stay under this kerajaan. Whereas when the sultan is bad, then one of the options was to run away. Yeah. So the mentality is not to say the king must be just and we have to tell the king what to do, right? So that was the era. Now, what was the era? I want to show you the change of a concept which shows this change in the mentality. Now, about the word nation. Yeah, I say that we are now in the era of so-called the nation state, and it is not the same as the previous era, and it's not evident for someone who lived in the previous context. If we trace the word nation, the original word was nacio, and nacio initially meant During the Roman time, you have citizens, and those foreigners, they are called natio. So they are foreigners on the fringes. They don't have as much right. And then after some time, in the medieval universities, the word natio was found to mean, because in a university, there may be people from different regions. So they call them nations. But nation in the sense that because they come from particular location, and they may have certain opinion, and when something coming up and there was public discussion and so on, so people may have, different groups may have different opinion. So the nation there comes to denote a community of opinion. And then later on, when historians was looking at the different texts, then they discovered that later on, the nation, for instance, in Alexis de Tocqueville's, one of the earlier French writer on democracy in America, he was talking about, when he used the word nation, actually he meant the lords and also the bishops who were deliberating in the ecclesiastical council. So it was a mixture of secular and also religious authorities. So it came to mean something like elite, those people with authority and those people who are representative of the various communities. And later on, with that in England, especially in the 16th century, people begin to use that word to mean a sovereign people, because there was this power struggle between the king and also the so-called middle class and those with property. So it came to become a word which is a sovereign people, because that means you have the right. You have the right to decide or to give your opinion and to influence the governance in the country. But this diagram was from an author called Leah Greenfield. But Greenfield noticed another way of using the word nation. This nation as a sovereign people is what we understand now in the nation state. But she noticed that there is another connotation for some other people. It means nation as a unique people. I think it is like if you read, let's say, the German nationalist, the earlier writers, Herder and so on, then when they were arguing that we are a nation, then we say, the folk people, we have our language and we have particular culture and so on. So the connotation there is not really synonymous with sovereign people, but we are a unique people. And that's why you have the so-called ethnic notion of nation and also civic notion of nation. So she said that actually the last meaning there is not necessarily linked with the so-called people's sovereignty. That means democracy. All right? When you say people's sovereignty, that means that the people are in charge. The people have the right to be the agent of their destiny. All right? So people together decide their own destiny. So you see that here, also, the word people, in England, initially when you say the people, it's like something derogatory, the common people, those, the poor, the workers in the factory and so on. But when you come to signify this nation, these people become the person who determine, it becomes something much higher. That means that when we say the people have decided, they are the people who make decisions. They are no longer just orang bawahan. Okay? So actually, if we look at Malaysia, we have gone through similar evolution. Let's say if you look at the word rakyat, we have two words maybe if you say citizen. One is rakyat, another maybe warga negara, right? So if you look at the dictionary, there are a few meanings given in the dictionary, and it's very interesting. Actually, the first meaning was seluruh penduduk sebuah negara. So this is what we understand now, right? But immediately, the second meaning is anak buah, orang-orang bawahan. So this is actually reflecting the historical root context of the word. And the third one is similar to what we say just now in English, the nation. Orang kebanyakan, orang ramai, orang biasa. And this is in distinction to the bangsawan. So that again is signifying where the word was meaning in the feudal society, in the Malay feudal society. And the last one, actually just now, Gombeng was talking about the soldiers, who fought for, who served the country, and then they become citizen. Maybe here there is a bit of that connotation that, the rakyat sometimes also denotes the soldiers. Now, another interesting thing is, in the Kamus Dewan, you have this, also the word kerakyatan. And kerakyatan means perihal rakyat, demokrasi, kewarganegaraan. Only there the word democracy appeared, which is interesting, yeah? And here, this is a passage from Sejarah Melayu. Maybe, I don't know whether you want to go through it, but basically, there are some scholars who argue that, in the Malay culture, in the traditional kerajaan, the agreement, there was an agreement between the rakyat and the raja. And the agreement was the raja must not humiliate the rakyat, right? And even if they make grave mistakes, even if they deserve death, they will be put to death, but not being humiliated. And actually, there was also, the second paragraph there is saying that, the king also says, but once we have this agreement, then no matter how zalim, how my descendants, no matter how zalim or jahat sekalipun, you cannot rebel against me. The haka is a word, okay? So that was the agreement. That was used by some to talk about so-called Malay culture. But for me, the purpose is more to give you a sense of, during that time, how was the rakyat and the raja's relationship, okay? Now, what happened? During the anti-Malayan Union movement, there was a scholar who analyzed a newspaper at that time. The anti-Malayan Union history, right? You study in the textbook. This was the origin of UMNO. He analyzed a cross-section of newspaper. One of the newspaper is Majlis. Majlis is actually the conservative newspaper. And at one point in time, when they know that the Sultan has signed the treaty, then, the Malays begin to, the aristocrats, they begin to oppose this agreement, this Malayan Union, the treaty signed by the Sultans. So in one of the newspaper, this Muhammad Yunus Hamidi, who was editor of Majlis, wrote, is in Malay, but from afar your humble servant lifts his 10 fingers to respectfully state that with the signing of the Michael Treaty, Your Majesty has ignored Your Majesty's subjects. It is hoped that Your Majesty will not be angered if Your Majesty's subject at some time in the future ignore Your Majesty. Actually, this was a very revolutionary attitude, yeah, because before that, actually the society was really authoritarian. And so you see some sense of saying that people should decide. Arifin Omar's book basically is looking at how, through the anti-Malayan Union movement, the Malay people, especially the Bangsawan, who led the protests, they begin to say, if the Sultan is not with us, then the Sultan is the haka. If you read the second quotation, it says the aura of Dawla is not just the Rajas, but the Rakyat's Dawla is even more higher. If there are no Rakyat, there will be no Raja. But if there is no Raja, the Rakyat can become Raja. This is revolutionary. Yeah? So they are reversing the Dahaka argument. So when Sultan saw this, that's why they begin to also support, the so-called anti-Malayan, the UMNO. Yeah? So that was the sentiment in the, I would say, the elite in the Malay community at that time. So there is a change there in the meaning of rakyat. It is saying that the Raja can be the Haka to the Sultan. The Raja can be the Haka to the rakyat, right? It's reversed. Now, another text which is interesting for me is the movement who was opposed to, you know, that after the protest was very successful, so it has forced the British, the British and the Raja and the UMNO leaders to sit down and renegotiate secretly the alternative, which is Federation of Malaya, right? And it was sort of, when it was published, it became sort of replaced the Malayan Union in 1948. But you know that also from history books that there was opposition to that, especially from a group of non-Malays, but also progressive Malays, right? And when they studied that document, they said, no, this is not for us. We don't want this. We want to reject this. Why? And they come up with a document which is called People's Constitution. And this was negotiated between the group of people led by Burhanuddin, and then the All Malayan Council of Joint Action, headed by Tan Cheng Lock. And it's very interesting to study the People's Constitution, because they talk about citizenship and nationality, and they criticize the agreement reached between the Raja, UMNO, and the British. Why? One of the criticism was about this federal citizenship. Initially, you know, the citizenship could be granted to all who were born in this country. But because of Malay opposition, so they have to make it more restrictive. But at the same time, I don't want to go into that complicated history, but anyway, what happened was a contradiction, all right? So the federal citizenship, the British says, is not equivalent to nationality. And you don't need to take an oath of allegiance to become federal citizens, but so long as you fulfill certain criteria. So the Putra and the AMCJ were criticizing that. It says, if the federation should come into being on this basis, with citizenship arbitrarily divorced from allegiance, and therefore from loyalty, and as long as this anomalous citizenship continue to exist, the federation would be prevented from developing into a sovereign democratic state, and will continue to exist as a real colony subject to the dictates of an alien government. So it is linking this citizenship with allegiance to the state, loyalty, and also democracy. All right? And they are claiming that, you know, this Federation of Malaya is not acceptable. And so another statement which I find interesting was, he says, the struggle for a genuine citizenship, demanding allegiance and engendering loyalty, and for democratic self-government are therefore inseparable. They are two sides of the same coin. So Malaysia has gone through similar journey. Okay? But of course, each country, because of our history and so on, the road travel is different. And each country may have their own words. And we see that the words evolve with their respective historical context. So now we go back to this evolution of the word. And we look at the text in the US. That was as far as in 1776, all right? This is the Declaration of Independence of the America from the Great Britain. And it began with the second paragraph or something. It says, all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, so that is their idea of nation state. They say, all of us, we are equal, equality. And they have inalienable rights as human person, that they have the right to life, to liberty, and to the pursuit of happiness. That was how it was framed. And it says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. Consent of the governed means democracy. All right? So there is their conception, and they say, you know, this king in UK, he has done so much terrible things. Now we want to be independent from them because we have the right to do so, because the role of the government is to ensure the liberty, life, and pursuit of happiness. Okay? So it says, whatever any form of government becomes destructive of this end, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principle and organizing its power in such set as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. Of course, you can read. It actually is not a very long preamble, but it is basically asserting the right of the people to choose their government. Okay? But of course, this is declaring war with their former colony. But this is how the concept, this was in 1776, and we know that the French Revolution was 1789. All right, then French Revolution, we saw that, just now we say, we saw that the king's head was, the wife's head was cut off, yeah? So there was, during that time, beginning to have this so-called changes in the conception of this political system. There is beginning this awareness that we should not be just ruled by a king, but people have the right to participate, yeah, to decide their own destiny together. So I call this from subject to citizens, because a subject is very often passive. Yeah, you are a subject of the ruler. You are the subject of the queen. Yeah, we have these British subjects. Then, from there, we change the conception and we say this citizenship is something that means they are endowed with certain rights and responsibility. Now, what are the conditions for democracy? Maybe I ask you, I think most of you will get all the answers right, I believe. What are the conditions for a good running of a democracy? Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. Sorry? Free and fair election, transparency, accountability. Say again? Religious freedom. Sorry, there is a freedom of media. Okay, yes, very important. Freedom of media, because only when you are correctly informed with the right information, you can make the right decision, right? So, I believe you know all this because it's quite, this is the so-called liberal democracy, where you ensure that, you can choose, make the right decision in choosing the government. Now, there's one thing there about democratic culture, and there is where maybe the concept of citizenship come in. I take a quote from a Canadian political philosopher, Will Kimlicka. He was talking about the importance of the concept of citizenship and how even in the West, they begin to realize how important it is. It's not just to ensure a democratic system, but the type of citizenship. Yeah, the health and stability of a modern democracy depends not only on the justice of its basic structure, all the conditions you mentioned, but also on the qualities and attitude of its citizens. What does he mean there? For instance, all right, you say environmental protection is important, all right? But, is it enough just to prohibit the use of plastic bags on Saturday to save our environment? No, right? Actually, some of the things cannot be legislated. Yeah, you need education and you need to foster that sense of citizenship to say, yes, we want our society to be ecology friendly and we need to do it in our own life. And sometimes the rules and regulations or laws cannot help. And another thing that is obvious was when we discussed about this National Harmony Act, whether we need to have Race Relations Act. Law is important. I think I must say that point. It's important to have anti-discrimination law. But at the same time, many people have voice and say, racial discrimination cannot be eliminated just by legislation of law, right? And that takes education. And that is where the concept of citizenship comes in. Now, Will Kimlicka, I find that concept, what he proposed interesting, so I'm going to share this with you. He said that he thinks the school should inculcate, and I think that even outside school, we should inculcate the so-called 4 virtues for effective democratic citizenship. The first of this is what he called public spiritedness. What does he mean? He means critical thinking. He means the ability to articulate our thinking and to make our stand. You know, maybe you write to opinion column, you write to newspaper, you make public statements regarding some issues of importance, and you reason it with, with arguments, with sound arguments and evidence and so on. Yeah, but that also includes the willingness to listen to those with a different opinion from you, with the same attentiveness, whether their argument is reasonable with basis or not. So this dialogue, this public reasonableness. So, and this, without this, actually, democratic system will not function properly. Yeah, you cannot say, I want to implement hudud because it's my own right. It's my right. Then you can't this dialogue anymore, right? But if you say, oh, it's good to implement hudud because it may curb crime, then someone who is opposed to that can say, in what way does it curb crime? Where is your evidence? What is your research? And the person must realize that they need to give justification and evidence in order to persuade the people. Don't just say that it's an insult to, insult to God, to my religion. Shut up, right? So there is what he meant by public spiritedness. But of course, we need to do that in a certain spirit. What he called civility or decency and tolerance. That means that, sometimes we have the right to do something, but it depends on how you do it too. Yeah? So there it is more, I think in the Rukun Negara we have also good morality and behavior, right? I think that is quite similar in the sense that when you dialogue with someone, you realize that you have the right as citizen, the others also have the right. They are also citizens. So there should be this respect, and there should be, if you want them to be treated with respect and so on, then you need to do that. I have come across some public forum where I remember once there was a secretary to Joseph Kurup who came to Selangor Chinese Assembly Hall and explained about his journey to become, why did he become assistant, giving up his lucrative lawyer's job. And then I saw one person stand up and start accusing him, I was put off. He was very rude. And of course, you can be critical, but, have some sort of civility and say it politely. You can put your point across, but how, And there, I think, there also, if we talk about democracy, it means that we respect diversity of opinion. So we have to respect other people who have different opinion. Yeah, I admire Ching Huat. The other day, we had a close dialogue, and someone was exposing some perspective from ISMA, and said, why should we be following the Western jurisdiction and so on? We should be an Islamic state. And then Ching Huat was saying, I respect your right to do that, but please give your reason, and you have to flesh it out and put it to the people, and you can debate. So I think that this respect for differences is also important. Even in the church, maybe there are some small group of people who don't feel comfortable with very pro-Brussels discourse. Well, we leave them alone. We can dialogue with them, but we respect them, And it is very hard to do when we think we are right. When we think we are the right side, you are the obstacle to social change. So sometimes our attitude shows. But this is the problem with democracy when you have that. I have seen, like in the newspaper, sometimes there's some reporting about negative things about opposition. Then I saw in the comment, this is propaganda from BN, But we don't evaluate what is reported based on the evidence, but just because, So I think sometimes we need to also be reflective. Now, the third thing is what he called a sense of justice. What does that mean? He's talking about the capacity to discern and respect the rights of others and to moderate one's own claims accordingly. That means that, we don't just fight for our rights. In the democratic space, it's true in interest groups. You always voice in your own interest, right? You give your opinion in accordance to the interests of your group you represent. But at the same time, what he says is, it's also important to have this sense of justice. Means those groups' interests which is opposed to yours, we need to also think from their point of view, and sometimes have to give and take. I think that probably, 5 more minutes, all right. So probably in that sense, there may be issue of affirmative action may come in. Should we help the weaker, the poorer section of our population? If we do, then there is this sense of justice that is involved. Now, all this is not possible without a shared sense of solidarity or loyalty. There, what he meant, this is the part that I like, he says that we should inculcate this sense of belonging, to say that you are one of us. That means that we need to mutually accept to be part of the nation. And this, he feels that what can be done is through history education. Not to sort of distort the history, but to teach history honestly, but to foster the sense that this is our history. Whether it's right or wrong or negative or positive, this is our history. We make mistakes, we have good moments, but this is our history. And this is our identity. So these are the 4 virtues he feels is important for a healthy functioning of a democratic citizenship. I skip this. Now, this one I'll just go through very quickly. Just now I asked, you go to birthday, do you expect change? There are actually, our problem very often, is a social phenomena. And it's too big for us. And some people just say, I don't go lah, no change, after that, no change. But actually, if you see through birthday 1, 2, 3, 4, did you see change? Yes, there was change. But maybe the change is not what you expected. But it seems to be going for the better, right? But is that enough? This is a matter of analysis, right? So I just list here, I have only 5 minutes, so I just list here the different modes of effectuating change. The first part is the so-called top-down. This is very often what we do. And then the birthday, I would say, is bottom-up, but it is not easy, as we saw. So I will just skip this. But what I mean is, so there are different ways of trying to make our voice heard. But which one is the more appropriate one? Actually, there is no simple answer. It depends on which group you are. Sometimes it depends on our resources. If it is, let's say, a coalition of NGOs, you have to look at what they do as NGOs, what type of resources they have. And even for a church group, let's say, if you want to organize for action or change, you have to look at, and sometimes both modes of action are complementary. When there is a pressure, then someone can negotiate. So sometimes people say, I want to do this, and it does not exclude other things. And so there, I think we need the analysis. And the thing that sort of makes sense, I tried to make it nice, but I couldn't. This was what I learned in my university, which made me sort of continue my journey. This is what they call pastoral cycle. That as a Christian, it is also part of my responsibility to contribute to society. And how do I do it? And here is like in a program, we went for exposure to expose us to reality that we don't know. Yeah, based on the experience, then we try to understand. We do social analysis and analyzing what's the problem there. Yeah, it's just like you see problems, you don't just go and help, but also ask, where does the problem come from? And then you have the so-called theological reflection, or what we did just now, the biblical reflection. And then we say, what type of small action we can do as a group or as individual? And based on your action, sometimes you come back and you reflect, and you say, yeah, maybe, like Bruce said, you come back and say, oh, we can do this. We should go forward. And then what is the change? All right? So I come to my last slide. Just now we were talking about, this. So I think I like this because it says, why is it so hard? Just now we heard the church succumbed to Nazism and let it go with the flow. But there were a few. This is a Catholic philosopher who was trying to document how he was trying to speak out against Nazism, and then how it was so hard when we read. Actually, this Carl Truman. We can feel why it is hard because, we shout very loud. We are against this. We are opposed to it, but nothing happened. So after a while, we say, never mind lah. Let's go home and take care of ourselves, So it's not just because it's risky, right? But it's also because it's tedious. And, we are going against a system. And it's not easy. And it takes, courage and some other worldly motivation. The last slide, this is from Catholic Social Teaching, one of the documents issued by Synod of Bishop called Justice in the World. I think it speaks to me. It says that action on behalf of justice and participation in the transformation of the world fully appears to us as a constitutive dimension of the preaching of the gospel, or in other words, of the church's mission for the redemption of the human race and its liberation from every oppressive situation. And it also mentioned that the members of the church, as members of society, have the same right and duty to promote the common good as do other citizens. Christians ought to fulfill their temporal obligations with fidelity and competence. And there are many other inspiring statements from that document. You can Google for it.